Jack, thank you. It's a soggy day up in central Pennsylvania. The old gray battleship of Beaver Stadium racing for one of the Big Ten's biggest games in a couple of decades. The nightcap of this historic twin bill under the pines of Kenan Stadium. Never been a bigger college football game in this state or this conference. From Chapel Hill, from Happy Valley, a special Judgment Day edition of College Game Day. Judgment Day. Time to separate the men from the boys. For North Carolina, the talking is over. The time is now.
We know we got to play almost a perfect game to beat Florida State.
The Noles know perfectly well what's on the line.
We're going to go out there and play like it's a national championship game.
For Penn State's Mike McQuarrie, a showdown with Michigan gets no bigger.
This rank's pretty close to life, you know what I'm saying?
For the Wolverines' All-American hero, the mission is clear.
We're going to try to make those guys lose the game.
And waiting patiently in the wings, #1 Nebraska.
We control our own destiny now.
Game Day's destinations, Chapel Hill and Happy Valley. Players call this place the Tar Pit. That's too nasty a name for a place this pretty. Carved out of the hillside, ringed by trees which are shedding their fall foliage. You know, basketball starts here tomorrow, but for once, hoops are on hold. Welcome to Judgment Day from Chapel Hill. Chris Fallow along with Lee Corso and Kirk Herbstreit. A rare and special day in college football. No other sport, guys, can possibly have a regular season day that is this meaningful. Certainly not Judgment Day in the Old Testament sense. It's big, but it's not the end of the world. It is the beginning, rather, of the championship chase, featuring the last 5 remaining major conference unbeatens. Solid #1 Nebraska trying to protect its lead in the polls over the 2 winners of these games. So, 11 hours from now, you can sit in judgment along with 132 pollsters and decide who is worthy of the #1 ranking, the inside track to the national title. Today, the players will make their statements. It's not about style, it's just about survival today. With something to prove against the one team that seems to have created some self-doubt in the Wolverine minds. For that, we welcome in Mike Adamle and Bino Cook from Happy Valley. Mike, good morning.
All right, Chris, this is the biggest game at Beaver Stadium since 1980, according to the fans here, when #4 Pittsburgh played #5 Penn State. #4 and #5, 4 of the top 5 teams playing against each other in the same weekend. Well, it's a little bit like the Hail Bob Common. It doesn't happen all that much, but when it does happen, it's something special. 1996, then you go back to 1971, and Bino Cook before that, all the way back to 1943 for a weekend like this one.
Yes, Mike, in 1943, #1 and 2, Notre Dame and Michigan played, and Duke and Navy played. Michigan lost to Notre Dame, and the incomparable Angelo Batelli was the quarterback for Notre Dame. He won the Heisman Trophy, and Frank Leahy won the first of his 4 national titles. In 1936, Pitt and Fordham played, but the big game was Minnesota-Northwestern. Northwestern won 6-0, but Minnesota did not win the Big Ten, but they won the national title. And the reason is Northwestern lost in November to Notre Dame.
Okay, and certainly a national championship, very much a possibility for the team that wins this game. When they're as evenly matched as Penn State and Michigan, well, sometimes it comes down to the little things, a fumble, a key mistake at the wrong time, sometimes the psychological edge. And for more on that, the third member of our Judgment Day team here in State College, Steve Cyphers. Steve?
Mike, if Michigan is to win today, it'll mark the first time since 1993 as the Wolverines have lost to Penn State 3 straight years. A psychological factor that could be a plus for Penn State.
I think it's good, but I think they're going to come with a vengeance because we've been beating them, so we really have to be on our toes.
It really doesn't matter. Each year you got a different squad. Each year, you know, you're at different places, and when you're playing #3 against #4 and both teams undefeated, I don't think it really matters what the previous years were like.
What about the previous weeks? After knocking off Ohio State in emotional style, the Nittany Lions admit to playing flat against Minnesota and Northwestern. They rallied for a win over the Gophers and then held off a rally against the Wildcats. For the first time in its history, Penn State has won 3 consecutive games by 4 points or fewer. But entering this game, that's an advantage, says Mike McQuarrie.
You know, I don't know if Michigan has had the same type of games, except for maybe Iowa, where they're in the fourth quarter going, you know, all out and in a dogfight. And we've obviously had 2 or 3 of those this year, going back to Ohio State too. And I think that has prepared us for this game.
That's really deceiving me because when stuff like that happens, you can't really judge a game by things like that when they're playing against Minnesota.
I don't think the fact that they struggled or didn't struggle, we've struggled in some games as well. I think when you're playing the 9th game of the season or the 8th game of the season, you will have struggled.
We're coming into a big game. What a better time to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Collins will have some linebacking help. He hasn't had the last 2 games. Brandon Short's injured ankle is healed. He's scheduled to start against the Wolverines. In this weather, it's scheduled to rain on and off throughout the day, but the field has been covered since Thursday evening. And, Mike, they won't take the tarp off until shortly before pregame.
So that's where we stand right now. Judgment Day here in Happy Valley. Back to you in Chapel Hill. Chris?
Well, Mike, I'll tell you what, I think you're right. Looking at Penn State coming into this game and Michigan coming into the game, I think a lot of college football fans expect Michigan to control the game. You look at Michigan, they have really dominated their opponents. Only one time have they been challenged by Iowa. Their defense the best in the country. Meanwhile, Penn State, over the last 3, their combined score 8 points over those 3 opponents. They look sloppy in their last 2 games against inferior opponents. I think today, be very careful. I think Penn State is ready to play their best game of the season. We're just going to have to wait to see if it's going to be enough to beat Michigan.
One thing about Penn State, they have 28 players on this football team who were there in 1994 when the Nittany Lions went 12-0. What does that mean? That means they're confident. The nucleus of the football team is experienced. What that means is they'll take the game into the 4th quarter, keep the cool, and that's when Penn State plays their best football, in the 4th quarter.
But it's also when Michigan has played its best football. Still no points allowed by that defense. What makes both these games interesting is that all 4 of these teams, although unbeaten, have looked so human and so inept even and so beatable at times. They may be starting to believe it. Charles Woodson says, yeah, I'm the best player in the country. It'll be interesting. A lot more in these 2 ball games coming up in College Game Day from State College and from Chapel Hill. And also on that #1 team, Nebraska, what they have to do against Missouri to hold their lead in the polls, something they are very focused on doing. Wolverine defense, so tough. Curtis Enos, the 4th quarter specialist for Penn State. We'll hit on those aspects. Plenty more on that Knowles defense. Ready to dominate. And on North Carolina, is it their breakthrough day? Come on back for Judgment Day, Game Day.
Judgment Day in Happy Valley, where Beano Cook could run for mayor and win. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Adderley here in Happy Valley. You know, Mike McQuarrie, Penn State's big redhead, he's been upbeat all week long. He holds one of the keys to today's game. Which will prevail, good offense or great defense? Steve Cyphers has more.
Mike, one reason this game is so appealing is that Michigan comes into it with the Big Ten's #1 defense, while Penn State comes into the game with the league's #1 offense. Those facts cannot be debated. However, when it comes to the final 15 minutes of the game, well, that's where the debate begins.
We like to think that the 4th quarter is, going to be our quarter.
We have a thing where we say that if a team doesn't score in the 4th quarter, then they can't win.
We get into that 4th quarter and it's, hey, okay, this is our time.
It wasn't their time last season. Not when Northwestern, Purdue, and Alabama outscored the Wolverines in the final quarter and Michigan lost all 3 games. But this season, in the second half, Michigan hasn't allowed a touchdown. In the 4th quarter, it hasn't allowed a point.
It's kind of become our trademark, something that we pride ourselves in now.
As the game goes on, it seems that we just get stronger and stronger after we see everything that they have to give us. We say to ourselves, they've given us their best, and look what they've done.
The players say few adjustments are made in the locker room at the half. Instead, they come on the sideline during the game. And they add the basic scheme doesn't differ much from a year ago. But they read and react less to attack and run more. A lot more under first-year defensive coordinator Jim Herman.
He works them up into a frenzy every week. So when they get on the field on Saturday, it's just, everybody wants to get to the ball. Everybody wants to make a big play.
We've got out of the thinking that a linebacker fits the mold of Dick Butkus. We're playing with smaller guys, and I think thus far we've proven that those guys can play.
The best proof, they say, came against Notre Dame in September. Trailing at the half, Michigan fumbled the ball away 3 consecutive times in its own territory in the 4th quarter. But the Irish failed to score.
I think since that time, our defense has played with the kind of confidence that you have to have a great defense.
You can't beat us by just running the ball or by just passing the ball, because eventually we're going to figure you out and going to tee off on you.
But now the opponent is Penn State, whose offense has featured fourth-quarter heroics of its own. Though its first 4 games were decided long before the final period started, when Penn State had to come from behind to beat Ohio State and then Minnesota, it did, because of Curtis Enis. 114 fourth-quarter yards against the Buckeyes, 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns against the Gophers.
Our defense has to stop Enis, and, you know, that guy is a tremendous tailback.
Carr knows. Last season, again in the fourth quarter, Enis iced a Penn State victory with a 38-yard run.
He'll run for 4 and 5 yards, 4 and 5 yards, 4 and 5 yards, and he knows that sooner or later in the fourth quarter, when he's got 20 or 25 carries and the other guys are tired, he's going to spring one on him.
By far the best defensive I've seen. They get to the ball extremely well with their speed and just their aggression, their love to make things happen.
The possibilities are obvious. The matchup intriguing. A chance for great theater.
Time to put up or shut up. You know, that's probably what's going to be on the field. The Penn State offense against the Michigan defense.
Saturday, somebody has to withstand that pressure.
Hopefully, it will come down into the fourth quarter, and we'll have a fourth quarter battle.
Nobody mentioned overtime. Neither team's been involved in that situation this year. But, Bino, how well does Curtis Enis have to play for Penn State to win today?
I think if Curtis Enis gains 100 yards, Penn State will win. If he gains 150 yards and Penn State wins, Chris Fowler will be interviewing him on December 13th in New York.
Well, Bino, I think it should also be noted that Curtis Enis' soulmate, Aaron Harris, again will not start. He's out for the season with a knee injury. He took a big load off of Enis in that Ohio State game. Once again, Anthony Cleary starts in his place. Chris, back to you in Chapel Hill. Kickoff T-minus 3.5 hours from now.
We can't wait, Mike, and these guys here can't wait to begin breaking down this game. Let's first talk about when Penn State has the ball. And Bino referred to Joe Paterno's success in big games. You know, some coaches get tight in big games. You know, Joe tends to play a conservative game in the smaller games, like the Minnesota game. In big games, not conservative.
Because he needs to know to beat those football teams. But one phase of Penn State's offensive plan will be to run directly at the Michigan defense and try to wear them down with an offensive line that averages 6'4", 296 pounds. Then they'll give the ball to Curtis Enis in the fourth quarter, and he will work his magic. Now, Curtis, number 39, has had 201 yards rushing in the last 3 games in the fourth quarter. Now, State will then use Chaffee Fields on a reverse play occasionally to slow down the Michigan pursuit. Now, remember one thing about Penn State. Penn State's offense is exactly like their uniforms, dull. But I tell you what, they will not beat themselves. Michigan will have to beat them.
Well, I think Michigan's very capable on defense. Michigan's defense is getting better as the season goes on because they're gaining more confidence with each impressive victory that they come up with. On defense, the reason I think they're so good is they have what every team in America wants. Versatility. They're physical up front, and they also have the athletes in the secondary to play with anybody. Physical toughness to go toe-to-toe in the front 7 when teams try to run. And as I said, the athletes back there in the secondary, like this man right here, probably the best athlete in college football, Charles Woodson. Then he comes up with a little bit of attitude. Today versus Penn State, you're going to see Michigan crowd the line of scrimmage, try to take away that main threat of Curtis Enis running the football, and they're going to blitz Mike McQueary all day long to make Mike McQueary and the Penn State receivers in this weather beat that Michigan defense.
There's a hidden reason for Penn State wanting to hold the football a long time. If they have the ball, Woodson's on defense. The more he plays on defense, the less he plays on offense, because Lloyd Carr doesn't want to use him up on offense. He played 16 plays against Minnesota. Now, when Michigan has the ball, they may not make as many big plays as you guys would like. They have it a long time, sometimes 5 drives of longer than 90 yards. The offensive line's been a big story this year.
It's a lot like Penn State. Michigan wins football games with great defense and an offense that controls the clock. They're not concerned about style points. Their primary concern is to come up with that end result, and that's the W, whatever it takes to win the football game. Wolverines rely on the big play from people like this. Anthony Thomas, who is the future of the Wolverines. He is a freshman. When they wear teams down, down. They'll get real tricky with the play-action pass like that right there to the tight end. Today, for Michigan, look for the same. Ball control offense. But to beat this Penn State defense, they're going to have to throw the ball. And I think you're going to see Michigan throwing on first down. Even with the weather conditions, you have to try to catch Jerry Sandusky's unit off guard a little bit, or you're not going to be able to move the ball.
Yeah, Jerry Sandusky's defensive game plan will be very simple. He's going to put his players in the right position, keep everything in front of them, and make sure they don't get over the top. The reason why? They'll make Michigan drive a long way for touchdowns, and it's hard to do that against Penn State. Number 44 linebacker Jim Nelson is responsible to stop the run. Watch this one. Boom! Nice shot. Now, number 6, Aaron Collins, another great linebacker. Now, watch this one thing about Penn State's defense. You can complete passes against them, but boy, you don't make many yards after you make the catch. Now, Penn State has allowed only 4 plays for touchdowns this year over 20 yards. That's a tremendous stat.
And in games when Penn State's offense has struggled, the defense has been tremendous in the red zone. Now, you guys disagree about Penn State's defense. You say it's real good. You say it's very suspect. To be continued, we'll have final thoughts on that game coming up. Meanwhile, we'll talk about the Buckeyes. Anybody in the Big Ten playing better than Ohio State right now? Pepe Pearson and company out of the Pac-10. Lee and Kirk can't wait for that Washington-UCLA game. We'll talk about that conference ahead.